Welcome to the Bear With Me podcast. On this week's episode, I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine, Danny. In our time together, we're going to discuss our understanding of body positivity, talk about its impact in our lives, its relevance in Black culture, social media's role in either helping or harming how we see our bodies, and how nudism connects to it all. This is the episode that everybody has literally been asking for. We're going to talk about nudism and sex. I've asked Danny to be a guest because she's a sexologist, and I believe she will offer context into why the two are often connected. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Stay tuned and bear with me. This is the Bear With Me podcast, and I'm your host, Jay. And who am I? I'm a 34-year-old Black man in America who just happens to be a nudist. My identity as a Black man, a nudist, plays a significant role in how I've come to see the world. I came to find nudism through my journey into body positivity, and I found that my experiences were things that others could benefit from hearing. So here we are. Welcome to my world. I think it's critically important to reflect on my journey up to this point in order to understand the impact my past has on where I'm going. So if you chose to join me on this journey today, I appreciate it. And I promise it'll all be worth it. Bear with me. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bear With Me podcast. I am your host, Jay, and it's really, really good to be back. It's been a minute since I've done an episode. Life has been lifing, but I'm super fortunate and super grateful to be joined by a good friend of mine, Danny. So first off, welcome to the show. Thank you for being a part of the Bear With Me podcast. Say hello to the people.
Hey, y'all. What's going on? I'm excited to be here. So that's, let's just get that out the way. I'm excited.
I'm really excited to have you. I don't know if you know this, but one of the reasons why, I chose to have you on the show specifically is one, because you're an amazing person. And I feel like,
Thank you.
I think the conversation that we're going to have is going to be really rich, and it's going to create a lot of opportunities for people to kind of wrestle with some of the content. But at the same time, I think that you just happen to be in a profession that I think lends a very interesting perspective to the conversation around body positivity, nudism, and just how we see ourselves in general. So I can't wait to dive in. I don't want to spoil it just yet, but I do want to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know this is your first time on the podcast, right?
Absolutely.
So how are you feeling
I'm
right
excited.
now?
Like I said, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to learn from you. I'm excited for you to learn from me. And we just going to get into this conversation.
All right. So I have a script that I usually send out to all of my guests. First question, I guess. Do you remember how we met?
I think it might have been... It was either like a probate or a party on probably maybe my campus, which was Missouri State University, also MSU. Yeah, I think that's how we met.
Yeah, I want to say it was years ago, definitely undergrad. I just remember, just traveling a lot. Greek life had us around the state a lot, which was one of the highlights of college, right? Just having those opportunities to venture outside of your campus and kind of connect and meet. And I'm starting to see that those connections that I made 15 years ago are still strong and still coming around, and I'm actually able to draw a lot from them, especially in this podcast space. So we're going to stay back in the past for a little bit, thinking back on your upbringing. What conscious or I guess subconscious lessons were you taught about your body, or maybe just bodies in general?
I think when I think back to growing up, it was always about being modest, I guess you could say, being in the sense of, okay, you need to be covered at all times, especially like being like home in your environment, being around family, friends, whatever. It was always about just being covered. I can always think about church going and how when you're in church, you are covered from your knees can't be showing. So if you're wearing a skirt, your skirt has to go past your knees. And then just in general with clothing, I would always have to do the length check to where how do I say this? I guess whenever you are putting on shorts or a skirt,
Okay.
you have to put your arm next to your leg, and then you have to make sure that it is past your fingertips. So that's always something that has kind of stuck with me, I think. And then it wasn't until I got older that I realized, things don't have to be that way. But I think just that's how it was growing up, that less was more. Or more, I'm saying that wrong. Meaning that, showing, yeah, that's what I meant to say. You want it to be covered up and you want it to be more modest so that people couldn't see really what you had to offer, I guess you could say.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting. So basically what I'm hearing you say is that you kind of grew up more in a conservative household.
Kind of. So I think, like I said, it just was more about being able to be covered for company, being able to be in a space like where people couldn't see your business, I guess you could say. But even thinking back to like my grandmother, so she would always be in like a t-shirt and maybe just, that was it. And so I think looking back to like Saturday mornings, right, when I would be at her house and spending time with her, I just thought that was always really cool that she just was so free. But maybe just in general with company, you stay covered as much as you can.
So in some ways, you felt very much like you grew up in a conservative space, but then also having that relationship with your grandmother and kind of seeing how she existed in her space, kind of seeing a different way, right?
Absolutely. And knowing that, not one way is necessarily the right way. And I think just being who you are, that allowed me to say, you know what? Okay, I can kind of get into this a little bit. So then that's when I just started to just be in a t-shirt and just feeling comfortable.
Okay. So really quick, the next question, when you hear the term body positivity, what immediately comes to mind?
Whoa, having confidence. I think so many times when it comes to body positivity, it is about being who you are, standing in that, believing that, feeling confident that you can rock whatever you want to wear. You can feel comfortable in your skin, and that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. It's almost as if you had the definition pulled up.
No. That's just truly, honestly, like how I feel about it. Like, I feel like being able to be positive about something, and it may not be the case for everybody, but I think just in general, it can encompass just having confidence. And if you have that confidence, then that's just going to be better, not only just for you, but just in general, because you're not going to care what anyone has to say. As long as you feel comfortable, that's all that matters.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear you say that, because the next question is, how would you say body positivity shows up in your life and your experiences? Or is this something that you're conscious about?
So for me, I think it can show up in the clothing that I wear. Now, of course, like most of the time, like Monday through Friday, I'm generally in some leggings, t-shirt, just because of what I do for my job, right? But on the weekend, that's my time to relax, just be free. And then, hey, if I'm going out with friends or I just want to go out by myself, I might dress up a little bit, or I might get a little cute, get a little sexy. And that just makes me feel good. So being able to show up for myself is important, because I feel like when you look good, you feel good.
Definitely. So would you say that the idea of body positivity is something that's embraced in our culture, meaning like Black culture?
It can be. I don't think people embrace it as much as they should be, because I think social media plays a huge factor into how we view ourselves as a society. And I don't always think that is correct. I think so many times we see what's happening in the media. I mean, again, it could be on all different types of platforms. And there is this persona that we try to portray. And I don't always think that is the way it should be. But that's just how it is. Like, I just feel like in general, the way that you might view yourself can be misconstrued by like what someone else sees of you.
Okay.
So I think in general, though, when it comes to just body positivity, I think it's kind of like 50-50, because you're going to have those people that are going to say, okay, like, I love my body. I love the way I look. I don't care what anyone has to say. I'm going to put it on, right? And so, but then you're going to have the other side of that where you're worried about what people have to say about you. And so that might hinder you from truly being who you want to be and dressing how you want to dress.
I mean, exactly. And I feel like, honestly, that can exist within the same person, right? So depending on who you're around or who you engage with, right? So I might feel a certain type of way about what my wife may have to say about me. However, if a random stranger on the street didn't like my clothing choices, I might not care. So I think, there's room for either or, So,
absolutely.
So something
and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And that's all right. I feel like it's however you're choosing to show up for yourself. You don't have to do that for other people. Like, as long as you're comfortable, that's what's important.
And so really quick, I love that you said that, because I wanted to kind of go back a little bit and jump on something that you brought up, right? You spoke a little bit about social media, right? And we're around the same age. And I just remember a time before social media where, we weren't bombarded with images every day, all day, right? The TV went off at some point.
Yep. Nowadays,
we have social media. And I don't know about you, but like I never log out of my apps. So at any given time, right? While I'm at work, like I can be scrolling, or if I'm at lunch, I'm usually on my phone, or my wife may send me something, or I may send things to my friends. So we always have access to social media. So how do you think social media plays a role in how we see ourselves or how we see our bodies in particular?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think you see people that you may want to imitate, which is sad, because again, just show up and be who you are. But when you're seeing influencers that are dressing a certain way or even saying certain things, you want to be like them. Not saying that's everyone's case, but it's just it's heavily influenced, I think, in how we view ourselves, because we see all these people doing all these things, and it's just a click of a button, or someone can hide behind this persona that they have on social media, but that may not be how they actually are. Okay. Almost like they're playing a role or a character of some sort. So I definitely feel like that plays a huge factor into who we are and like who we want to be based on what we're seeing other people do.
And at the end of the day, I think it's about, it's a business. Social media has become profitable. It's something that people do for a living. And just like capitalism with anything else, once it gets a hold of something, it usually kind of consumes it and takes over it. So a lot of times, like you said, the images and things that are presented on Instagram and TikTok and other social media networks, a lot of times those aren't reality for those people who are even putting some of those things out there. It's just what pays. But the consumers on the other side see, some of these people who are, influencing, maybe, their body goals, right? And are not aware of their real life or what they really do to get to that point, right? So I definitely think, it can be dangerous.
Absolutely. I think in general, like I said, so many people put on a front about, how they are, because it's a character for some people. It's who they're playing in that moment, but that may not be who they are. And knowing that, like you said, that's a dangerous thing, because you have people that might be looking up to you thinking, okay, I'm going to be this way, or I aspire to be like who I'm seeing, but they may be totally different from in their day-to-day life, I feel like, and not what they're doing on social media.
Okay. And so just kind of thinking on the other side of the coin, right? Do you think that there's space for social media and influencers to actually play like a positive role in how we see ourselves?
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think just being able to be vulnerable sometimes is important. Knowing that you're a real person and knowing that, hey, like I go through struggles and trials and tribulations just like the next person. And so when you see that and you see someone being able to say, okay, I'm going to show up this way and I'm going to let my followers know I'm human just like you are. Knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from that, because so many times when you're putting someone on a pedestal, you are thinking that this is it. This is the law. This is how it is. And that's not always the case. And so I think just being able to use your platform for positivity, being able to get the message out there for whatever your brand is, whatever your niche is, right? Being able to get that message out there in a way that is still authentic and true to you.
I love that. Because at the end of the day, like the last word you said is make sure that it's true to you, authentic and true to you. I think truth is really like the thing that makes the difference, right? You know, if you are an influencer and you are promoting, you know, a certain supplement or food and you actually use it, I don't really have a problem with people promoting that, right? It's the people who say things like, you know, do what I do to get these results. Yet behind closed doors, they're not doing the things that they're telling you to do. And then you have people who are, you know, breaking their backs trying to look the same. And then the person who was promoting it isn't supporting the same product, right? So I thank you for, you know, adding a little context to that. So moving, kind of shifting gears a little bit here. Talk to me a little bit about what you do.
Yes. So with me, I am a current future sexologist. I am currently in a program and I'm nearing the end of my completion to be a certified sex coach / sexologist. And so I'm in a program that's called the Inclusive Sex Coaching Program, and it's through the Academy of Inclusive Sexuality Studies. And so I'm nearing the end of that, and I'm excited for where this journey is going to take me. I recently, within really the last month and a half, started a group on Facebook called Empowered Discoveries, and just about exploring sexual wellness. And so in that group, we foster, you know, pretty much open conversations about all things sexual wellness and relationships, and whether it could be someone asking for advice. We just have a good time over there. I'm the founder of Empowered Discovery Sexual Wellness and Education. Just got my LLC this month.
Congrats.
Be on the lookout for big things. Thank you. So just be on the lookout for big things, whether it's programming. And for me, I just want to educate people about being informed, having those informed practices for your life. And that's important for me. I want to be able to have an inclusive, a judge-free zone to just be yourself, learning to explore through body positivity, through sexual wellness, and just being knowledgeable so that you can make those informed choices about your life.
I love that. I love the knowledge part, right? Because I think that a lot of us, if we're being honest, and I kind of talked about, you know, my introduction into nudism actually started with my insecurities that I developed about my body in relation to the porn that I was watching at a very early age, right? And when I think about the experiences that I had growing up, it really stems from me hiding things from my parents, because I really felt like if I would have been honest about some of the things that I was seeing and some of the feelings that I was having, maybe my parents would have been able to help me through those things a lot earlier than life, right? But I really see it as a lack of knowledge, right? We didn't talk much about sexuality or sex in our household. It was like one of those, you know, you had a conversation about where babies came from around 6. Then, you know, you got to be around puberty, you know, it's like, hey, don't do that. And then the next conversation I remember having with my parents were really my dad at 18 when I was heading off to college, and he was just like, hey, son, you know, you did what I asked you to do. Don't make me a grandfather. Go out in college and have fun. So to hear you talk about creating a space in which people can come together and learn, not just from you, but from each other around some of these topics, I definitely think that there's room for education, there's room for growth, there's room for healing. But how did you even become interested in being a sexologist, right? Like, when you were a kid, was that something that you wanted to be? Like for me, I wanted to be like Mike, right? I wanted to be a basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to be a basketball player when I was growing up. So like, how did you get to this point where you decided like, yo, I think I'm going to do this?
Yeah, so this has been a journey, okay? So this journey started for me actually in like college, right? So when I first started, I have always been very comfortable with sexuality and everything that means. I've always been open to talk to anybody who will listen, including my friends, about all things sex, right? So when I first got into it, it was more about, okay, well, people are inviting me to come out to sex stores. So it would be friends. In general, we would just take a little cute field trip, go check out some things. And I was always really not necessarily knowledgeable about it, but I just love to learn. And so it wasn't until a few years where I was like, man, I could kind of turn this into a career. But I don't know what that's going to look like. So in the summer of 2022, I kind of got really serious about it. So I was looking up all of the different documentaries on sexual wellness, all things sex. I was looking at different books, different movies, and kind of just really trying to figure out where I wanted to zone in and figure that out. And so I was like, okay, this for sure is something that I want to do. How am I going to get started? So I looked into a lot of different programs that offered sexual education or sexual wellness, and I knew that I wanted to get a certificate of some sort. And so after doing that, fast forward to March of this year, 2024,
okay,
it happened to be on Facebook, and one of my sorority sisters had posted about her program and what she had did and what she was currently doing. And I knew that was my sign for me to reach out to her. Like, I was kind of scared, and I was like, oh, I don't know, should I reach out? And I was like, you know what, I am going to reach out, because so much of life is about being able to just own it and do it. And if you want to do something, hey, go for it. So reached out to her and got started the end of March, beginning of April. So I got started with the program. So it's been about 7 months. And I am almost finished. I'm almost finished on this journey to becoming certified. So I'm excited. I didn't even know where it was going to take me. I just knew that I wanted to educate people on all things sexual wellness. And I feel like whenever you're educated, you can make those informed decisions. Because there's so much wrong information out here. And I knew for me, even growing up, we just didn't talk about sex. Like, it was so taboo. And I'm like, whenever I get older and I start having kids and a family, that is not going to be the case for me. Like, it should be a normal conversation, because that's how you learn and that's how you educate yourself. And you can also do preventative measures just by having that knowledge.
And I definitely agree with that, right? Because I think that as long as it's something that's seen as being taboo, right, I think it creates a barrier that could ultimately impact us in our adult lives, right? Like, I think about if you have viewed sex as being something that's taboo your entire life, and then you all of a sudden are an adult, and now you're in a situation where you're married or you're in a serious relationship, and now you have to unlearn all of those things you've learned over a course of a lifetime in order to be able to connect with your partner. Whereas I feel like if we were more open as a society to the education, and I don't want to mix education with just all the random things that are out there, right? Because there is a difference, right? I think the education piece, me being an educator, I think it's crucial. It's really important because, like you said, I think with the more education we have, the more we're able to make informed decisions about our health and our lives and things that will impact us later. So you mentioned that you're getting ready to complete this program. So in your perfect world, what does it look like once you have your certificate, once you graduated, and you're done with the program? What does that look like for you? What are your next steps?
So I'm big into talking to people in the community. I'm good at just speaking my truth. and being able to share that out with others. And then, like, if I can help someone with the things that I've learned on this journey, whether it's personal or professional journey, I'm all for it. Being able to just be in a space where people feel confident, providing that safe space for people. So I definitely want to do some programming to get the message out there. And it could be on a variety of topics. But for me, that has always been one of my major goals, is being able to have a platform where people are looking to me for guidance, in a sense. I'll definitely be taking on clients soon as a sex coach. And so pretty much a sex coach is going to be someone that is coming to you for guidance. They may have a topic of something that they need to get worked out, and they just don't know where to turn. And so they may come to me and offer some advice. For me, as a future sex coach, I am going to kind of see what they are currently doing, right? And then be able to offer them some guidance on what the next steps could be, and kind of helping them problem solve. And then also not just offering them solutions, but helping them to figure out what is next and giving them tools to continue to be successful. So that's a huge part of that. And again, that could be anything related to sex, that could be relationships, that could be intimacy, just anything in that realm. Because I think so many times people don't realize that intimacy does not always mean intercourse. And so there might be people that just need help getting that spark back for their relationship, and or how to feel connected to each other again, or just even how to feel connected for yourself. And so I want to be able to help people in a smaller setting, in that intimate setting, maybe one-on-one, and then also being able to have do workshops and help people come in, be able to do some programming and hosting some events to just get the word out about, being who you are, being authentic, and just learning about sex. Like, that's what I'm here for. I feel like, honestly, that is a part of my journey. And that is a part of my why, is I want to give back to other people what I didn't always have. And I want people to feel confident in the choices that they're making.
I mean, and I love that. So first off, again, congratulations. I really think it's dope to, be passionate about something, but taking it then to the next step, right? It's one thing to have a passion, to watch documentaries and to read books and to do all of that stuff, but it's a whole different thing when you actually invest your time and your money, when you focus in and study these things so that you can create content to put out there with the intent and the hope to help and support others. I mean, because it kind of makes me think about what I'm doing now, right, with this podcast. Naturism was something, or nudism was something that I became passionate about, in my early 20s. And now just deciding to jump out there and step out there on faith. So I love it. I love when I hear that, my friends and family are, finding things that they're really passionate about and really putting the time and the work in to create something and to give to the world. So again, kudos to you. And I can't wait to hear more about your journey and your story and how you're able to take what you're doing now and impact, people around you. But I did want to kind of transition a little bit, right? Because we're gonna get into one of the main course, I guess, of the podcast. So before we spoke about this a little while ago, were you aware of nudism?
So I didn't know that that's necessarily what it was called, but in general, I think I'd heard about it, but wasn't actually sure, like, oh, it's called nudism. Like, I didn't maybe connect the two until a few years ago.
Okay. So if you had to take a guess, how would you define nudism?
So I would define it as being comfortable in your skin and being fully naked, and being in a space where you can be you without the restrictions of clothing.
I mean, I would agree, right? But similar to your first point, right? I think a lot of people, they don't really like titles. You know what I mean? So a lot of people, I think, understand the philosophy and the ideals of nudism, but they just didn't realize that it was a real thing, that needed a title, that people actually did, and there were groups and organizations that formed around these ideas. But I think that you just being able to define it ultimately shines a light on, what it really is, right? And how easy it is to understand. From your perspective, how would you say that nudism contributes to body positivity and self-esteem?
So I think it's huge. I think when you think about nudism, again, you think of it being just a space of being nude. And I feel like if you feel comfortable in your skin and you feel confident, you are going to show up for yourself in a way that is freeing. And I feel like if you feel free and you're like, oh yes, like I can be naked today and I'm just in my own thoughts and I don't have any of those restrictions on me, I think that can work to your benefit of having that healthy conversation with yourself about just being positive and being open. And sometimes that can be hard to do, but I think it can help you with just being comfortable with your natural body and just maybe even some insecurities that you have. So being able to just strip all of that thing, strip all of those clothing away and just focusing on, okay, this is where I am right now, and that's okay. So I think it absolutely plays a role, and they do go hand in hand.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the fact that once you strip everything away, you're kind of out there, right? So
Yep.
if you are
Out
insecure,
there,
I hope those insecurities disappear kind of quickly, because at that point, there's nothing to hide and you're really already out there. So the title, I'm working on different names and thinking about different titles for the episode. And the first thing that kind of came to mind is the idea that nudism isn't about sex. Debunking myths with sexologist Danny, right? And I'll give you a little context behind why this episode is so important. I put out a poll not too long ago, and probably one of the most asked for episodes was in relation to nudism and sexuality and how they aren't mutually exclusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been a nudist now for a little over 10 years, and no matter where I am, what club I choose to be a part of, or what group I might find myself connected to, one of the main conversations that you'll hear on any nudist platform, any podcast, usually has something to do with how nudism is not sexuality, or is not connected to being sexual. And I think that nudists find themselves having to promote this, like over promote this topic, because a lot of times it harms the work that we're trying to do as far as encourage body positivity, right? People think that, nudists are just closeted swingers or people who are a part of the BDSM lifestyle or things like that, right? Like they're just trying to get us, and they're using something like nudism to kind of draw us in. So on the reverse end, I find that a lot of nudist communities tend to over promote that they're not sexual so that people could feel more comfortable. As a sexologist, talk to me a little bit about that. Why do you think people automatically connect being naked with sex or being sexual?
Because for a lot of people, you are getting naked to have sex. And so you don't necessarily think, oh, well, I can just be naked for me. I can just be naked to help gain some clarity. I can be naked for being free and to clear my mind and to work on my mental health. I think so many times it is about being able to, I don't know, I think for them, they may think, okay, well, if I'm naked, like, why else do you need to get naked? To take a shower, to, you know what I mean? And to have sex, and not realizing that there are so many benefits to being a nudist or just being naked in general that don't necessarily have to deal with anything sexual.
And I agree. But so I want to say maybe a few years ago, I was working on an article talking about the same thing. I actually never finished the article because I found myself kind of getting overwhelmed with the process of writing it. But it's perfect that we're talking about it in the sense of this podcast, because I did a Google search. I just typed in the word nudist on Google just to see what would pop up. And the first thing that popped up was pornography. So like, what are your thoughts? What do you think about that? Do you think that contributes to why people connect nudism with sexuality? Is it just because social media, online, like when you...
Absolutely. I think so many times people are feeling comfortable in their skin and they are not necessarily being like a sexual icon. And honestly, that might be the case for some people, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and they're seen as a sex symbol. So they're like, okay, the less skin I'm showing, people are going to view me in this certain type of way, to where it may be sexual, when honestly that may be far from the truth. It may be just you feeling confident in your body and realizing that, okay, like I feel good when I am showing some skin. But again, I do think that that's what we see so much now, and that whenever we are seeing people in a space of, okay, we're seeing your bodies, why else would you be showing it? Like, surely you wouldn't be showing it just because you feel like you look good. Surely you wouldn't be showing it just because you feel comfortable in your skin. And so I think, absolutely, when we see that in the forefront and we see porn being that way, or again, in a lot of videos, it can be about, okay, well, this is how they're being portrayed. This is what we're seeing. So I'm automatically going to equate that to being the same thing.
Absolutely. Because like, once I got to the point where I was more comfortable in, identifying as a nudist, right? And I started to kind of talk about it with family and friends. Like, some of the first questions that they ask is like, what are you doing there? Like, what do you all do there? And it was almost like a surprise that we weren't having sex. You know what I mean? And so I had to tell them, like, nudists do the same things that most people do when they're hanging out at a beach, or if they're hanging out at a party. Like, there's community, there's conversations happening, there's games that are being played. But a lot of people just can't separate the two, because I honestly feel like the only time many people, like you said, are naked is when they're having sex or showering. So I found a few myths about nudism, and I just wanted to kind of throw them out there and kind of see what you think and how you respond. So we already kind of talked about the first one, that nudism is inherently sexual, so that we just discussed that it's not, right? It's about embracing your natural state and fostering body positivity, often in a non-sexual context. The second myth is that nudists are exhibitionists and voyeurs. What have you to say about that?
No, like I feel like so many times, nudist is not automatically about the sexual gratification. It is about whatever you are feeling. Like I said, I think so many times nudism is about just being confident in your skin, and you're feeling comfortable. And like I said, once you strip away the clothing, it's just you. It is you and your thoughts, and you don't have to worry about all those things that come with it, I feel like. And I feel like so many times, again, this is just what as conversations that we've had, I feel like about it. I feel like for the most part, nudists are definitely going to value privacy. It's about even that big aspect of respect, being able to respect each other enough to have conversations, to feel comfortable, but also being in boundaries. And versus when it comes to exhibitionism, cannot talk today, and voyeurism, it is more so of that sexual gratification. And I think for nudism, it's the opposite.
And you know what? I think that because of the bad press that, nudists get because of being connected to sex, I think that sometimes we don't see how, or even acknowledge how, there's positives that we both share, or we should share, in some sexual spaces, right? Like you just said something, consent, right? I think consent is really important to nudists, but also I think it's something that should be really important in sexual spaces, whether it's with your partners or whoever you choose to be engaged with. Can you talk about maybe, the importance of, having consent and being respectful of those boundaries?
Yes. So having consent is huge. And being with that, being able to not only make informed decisions about whatever situation that you're dealing with, making sure everybody is on the same page. So there is this really, really cool motto that I like to share out with people, and it is the fries method. And so that just means when you think about fries, it is going to be freely given. So that means that you are actively having conversations about anything that's dealing with consent. So that's the freely given portion of it, right? Then you have reversible. So many times people don't realize that once you give consent for something, that does not mean that you're giving consent for everything. And at any point in time, that consent can be revoked. Because again, it's you feeling confident enough to say, you know what, I really am not okay with this.
Right.
And that's in any type of space. Then you have the I that's informed. Again, you being able to talk to someone and being knowledgeable and saying, you know what, this is how I feel about this, or this is what I want to try. And as long as you guys are on the same page, then that is what's important. It's about having that active communication when you get down to it. Enthusiastic is the E. So that is, again, when you are excited about it, you have given your consent for something, knowing that it is okay to have those moments of being like, you know what, like I got this. And I've talked to this person. I feel comfortable with this person. Now we can move on. Also, consent is being the S, very, very specific. Being able to say exactly what it is that you want or won't do. And then once you talk about it, then you can move on. So that's an easy way that I tell people about consent. And so when it comes to, I feel like maybe nudism spaces, everybody should be having that conversation, because you want to be confident and comfortable with who you're talking to, who you're around, even the environment that you're in, right? You want to be comfortable to be there. And if something seems off, then maybe you didn't have those conversations like you would have initially intended, which I think is important. So that's a big deal, I think, for a lot of people. So absolutely, being able to have that consent model, talking to people about what it is that you need. And it's just, again, it's a yes. A lot of times it's about, you want to make sure you have a authentic yes. And if it's not, then you need to go back to the drawing board, try it again to where you and the person that you are having that consent conversation with, making sure you guys are on the same page.
So, I mean, you just said a lot there, right? And I really want to spend some time to kind of unpack that a little bit, because one, I love fries. And so I don't know if I'll ever be able to go to Five Guys and eat the fries without thinking about consent, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. And you should.
Which is a good thing. You know, they're going to put a little extra fries in the bottom of the bag. So,
okay.
A little extra
That's what I like too.
A little extra consent that comes with that, right? But no, I think that conversation is easy to digest, but also I think that it's really important. And when I think about, sometimes how nudism and maybe sexuality could intertwine, I think that analogy was perfect, because to be honest, I feel like that was what the first conversation was like between me and my wife when we went to a nude beach for the first time, right? Mm-hmm. I had been a nudist for about 8 years before, we had ever ventured off into, going to that space. But although I was super comfortable, I had to respect the fact that this was a new experience for her, and that I wanted to make sure that I was open and forward about what was going on and what was getting ready to happen, so that I didn't that I didn't ultimately invite her into something that she wasn't ready for. And then also, I think when I was listening, just some of the themes that you were talking about with, fries, right, is being open, being forward. The reverse part is critical, because at any point on the way to the beach, there was a space where we could have turned around or went to another beach or not gone that way, right? And then that excitement, making sure that there's a general like curiosity and excitement there, you know, when you're inviting people into these spaces. But then also, you know, I think part of that is also realizing that, you know, and I think this kind of hits on the next point that I'm gonna bring up, is that people think that, you know, nudists are just naked in a forceful way, right? Like, this is who I am, you're gonna love it, or just deal with it. And that's really not how we live, right? When we went to the beach, right, I didn't expect her to disrobe. You know what I mean? She wore her bikini and she wore it proudly. I did not wear my swimsuit, right? But we were both able to enjoy ourselves at our level of comfort without imposing our thoughts or desires on the other person, right? And I think that's important in nudist spaces. I think that's important in relationships. I don't know. What do you think?
No, absolutely. And like I said, I think so much about it, you know, with consent being that you have to be able to have those conversations, making it really specific. Again, if you are having a conversation with someone and you're saying, yes, I like this thing, I'm going to do this, this is what we're going to talk about, and you're being really specific with them, and realizing that, and a lot of times about consent is about respecting boundaries too. It is about being able to openly talk to someone about what it is that they need, what they value, what their hard yeses and their hard no's are too. And people don't realize those are just conversations that should be happening with anything. And especially when it comes to nudism, because you want people to be in a space where they feel comfortable to be themselves.
Absolutely. And I think one of the points that you keep hitting on that I think is really important to kind of highlight is the idea of boundaries, right? And I think that in nudists' attempt to separate themselves from, or ourselves from, sexuality, I think sometimes we aren't being realistic in a sense, right? I think sometimes nudists kind of see themselves as existing in some form of utopia, like, oh, there's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no homophobic behavior, there's none of this stuff that exists in this community because we're free and we're accepting and we're naked, right? And at the end of the day, nudists are just people, right? So there are spaces in which I think sometimes lines can be blurred, right? Sometimes people aren't as good about creating boundaries. And I think it's, you know, hopefully it's about having open conversations like this, right? Where you're not just preaching to the choir to other people and saying that, oh, we don't do this because we're nudists, right? Or we don't do this because we're this. But having an open conversation and exploring like where some of these ideas come from, what boundaries are necessary in certain spaces, because what may work for me and my family may not work for another nudist in theirs. You know what I mean? And both are okay. Like, nudism isn't bad, right? Sex isn't bad. It's a great thing, right? And so I think as we become more comfortable, both nudists and non-nudists, to having conversations about bodies, about self-esteem, about, you know, our images and also sex, I think the world will be more comfortable just having the conversations about the boundaries that are needed. So I don't know. I feel like I just went off on a little tangent.
Well, like I said, again, it is so necessary to everybody to feel comfortable. But also, too, so many times when it comes to, I feel like, nudist spaces, baby, and you're having that conversation of consent and wanting to be respectful, consent can also be a spectrum. Like, it can be about like, well, yes, and. So like, I'm excited to do this, you know, whatever the case may be, yes, but. So again, being able to follow it up with, sometimes you have questions. And it is important to have those follow-up questions so that everybody's on the same page. It could be a maybe. It could be a no, but. No, and I'm not going to do this. We are not going to go here. And once you have those hard things established, that's what makes it important, because everybody's on the same page now. You've talked about it. Now you can move on and do what you need to do. And I feel like being in a nudist space is going to help you do that, because everybody's going to be comfortable with that. And like I said, again, once you strip away the clothing, it's like we're still just regular people. We've gotten past that awkward stage, maybe for some. And you're like, now we can just talk. Now we can just be these regular people that we've always been. We're just naked, and that's okay.
I mean, you said it, not me, right? So, for my listeners out there, right, the goal of this podcast honestly is not to convince or recruit or, to recruit nudists, but it's really to have honest conversations, right? And I think that a lot of times we develop thoughts, or we surround ourselves with people who think the same way that we think, or who are part of the same groups and clubs that we are. But I think sometimes, at least, for me, some of the most enriching conversations is when I'm talking to somebody who may not necessarily identify the same way as I do, but we can explore our identities and kind of find somewhere in the middle where they overlap, or where there's at least some understanding that's able to happen. So with that being said, right, a lot of times nudism and sexuality are kind of put against each other, right? Almost like they're enemies in a sense. But as we kind of close out, because we've been talking almost an hour now, right? So as we kind of close out and, in this episode, I'm just curious of what you think. Can nudism lead to a healthier view of sexuality by removing shame from the body?
Absolutely. So I think that there are a lot of psychological benefits as it relates to nudism. And I think, like I said, once you get down to the root of what that could look like, then it could become an option for a healthier space. So again, not only just the obvious of just that body image, that body positivity that you are having, but it can, enhance your self-confidence. It can be a huge stress reliever. I think so many times it's just having that freedom from just like what society says that we can be or what we should be. That's a big thing. And just being able to have the option of being vulnerable, being open without, like I said, without those restrictions. Plus too, like, I know for me, when I'm naked, I feel good. Like, it could be after the shower, and I don't rush to put on clothes right away anymore. I'm like, let me just be in my body. Let me just be in my thoughts. Let me just do all these things that make me feel good. But too, like I said, I've talked a lot I've talked a lot about being able to just strip away the clothing. But so many times when you are in that mindfulness state of focusing where you are right now in the present, you don't have time to overthink things because that restriction is gone. So I do feel like they can coexist with sexuality and nudism, but they don't have to. They can be completely separate and doing it for whatever you need. You know what I mean? Like, for you to have that personal freedom, for you to feel empowered in your decisions to do that. That's what's important. And as long as you can do that and you feel good about that decision, hey, that's what it is.
And there you all have it. So really quick, I really, really want to thank you so much for, again, agreeing to be a part of this. I've been really wanting to do a podcast for about 5 to 6 years, right? And I really was just afraid to kind of put myself out here and to kind of share these things, not really with strangers. Like, I really don't care what strangers think as much, but I was really, I guess, afraid to put it out there for people who are a part of some of the communities that I was a part of. And because I was kind of worried about how I would be seen, because people have such a negative outlook on nudism, or because there's a misunderstanding that it's not inherently sexual. I thought people would automatically lump me in with those assumptions, and it kind of kept me away from doing what I'm doing. So the fact that I have a podcast and a platform now, and that I get a chance to have these amazing conversations with my friends who are doing amazing work in their own right, in their own spaces, it truly means a lot. And especially with the journey that you're on and the work that you're doing and how you're helping people like today, it definitely, adds some validity to the podcast and just kind of hammers my point, even more, right? It's not necessarily about shedding clothes or, being nude. You know what I mean? That's never that's not the focus of the podcast. The focus of the podcast is to hopefully help people think about how they see themselves and stepping outside of their comfort zones, whatever that may look like, and figuring out what it is that they're passionate about and how they can use those things to help develop a stronger sense of self. So thank you again. And before we close, I just want to give you the floor. So maybe for the next minute or so, if you have anything that you want to say, questions, promote, or whatever it is, you will get the final word.
Yes. So I just thank you for having me on and creating this space for us to just have real, raw, authentic conversations. I think it's so necessary and needed in this crazy world, in the society that everything seems to be taboo. Everything seems to be, we shouldn't talk about it, or let's be quiet about it. No, like, this information should be out there. And a lot of times it's just about being able to be yourself, again, authentically, showing up and doing the work in a positive way. And sometimes that is not always seen, or it may be overlooked. So like I said, I appreciate you for giving me this time and this platform to just share a little bit about some things that I know about. So if you are excited and interested in looking at where to find me, you can find me on Facebook. Type in your search engine, Empowered Discoveries, Exploring Sexual Wellness. Do a little plug there, where, like I said, we talk about all things sexual wellness, and we make it fun, we make it educational, and it's just really a safe space for you to be yourself, ask questions, have any comments, and just really go on this journey together as we explore sexual wellness.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you so much, sis. I appreciate you. And
you're welcome.
I look forward to seeing, where this journey takes you. And hopefully, maybe one day when I'm at 100,000 viewers and subscribers, you know what I mean? I can have you back on the show and we can talk about where we landed in a few years.
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you all for listening. This is the Bear With Me podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Thank you all so much for lending me your ears. Until next time, bear with me.